Hey friends, tonight we're embarking on a journey so wild, so impractical, and so deeply unsanitary that even your most chaotic Monday morning will seem like a spa day. Yes, we're talking about time traveling to biblical times, where the Wi-Fi is non-existent, the bread is flat, and the only thing more mysterious than the Holy Spirit is what's actually floating in your water jug. So before you get too cozy, do me a favor, like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me what modern comfort you'd miss most if you woke up in the Bronze Age. But only if you're actually a believer in this channel or in the power of not dying from ancient soup. Now, dim those lights. Put on a fan for that soothing, ancient desert breeze effect and get comfortable. Maybe wrap yourself in a blanket, because tonight you're about to be spiritually and physically transported to a time when room service meant yelling at your cousin to fetch more olives. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it would actually take to survive in biblical times? Would you know how to find water that doesn't taste like camel feet? Could you build a shelter with nothing but palm fronds and a prayer? Would you recognize edible plants? Or would you just eat the first thing that looked vaguely like a Chick-fil-A sandwich? And what about breakfast? Was it all locusts and honey? Or did someone invent oatmeal before the Romans ruined everything? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1000 BC, give or take a few plagues. Your sandals are missing, your stomach is already rumbling, and you're about to discover that ancient hospitality mostly means not being chased off with a stick. Good luck, you're thirsty. Not, I forgot my water bottle at Pilates thirsty. More like, I've been wandering the Judean hills for 6 hours and my tongue feels like a sandal thirsty. The nearest well is Aruma. The river is suspiciously green, and you're about to learn why ancient people were obsessed with cisterns. Let's set the scene. The sun is a relentless, judgmental eye in the sky, and every step you take kicks up a cloud of dust that somehow finds its way into your nostrils, your sandals, and your soul. Your lips are cracked, your tongue is staging a protest, and you're starting to hallucinate the sound of a distant ice machine. But this is biblical times, and the only thing colder than your prospects is the look you'll get if you ask a shepherd for a La Croix. You scan the horizon for anything that might resemble water, a glimmer, a puddle, a mirage shaped like a Starbucks. Instead, you spot a group of locals gathered around what looks like a giant stone donut. Congratulations, you found a well. But don't celebrate yet. The well is the ancient equivalent of a crowded coffee shop. Everyone's there, nobody's in a hurry, and the regulars are judging your technique. You approach, trying to look casual, but you're painfully aware that you have no bucket, no rope, and no clue. The locals are eyeing you like you're about to cut in line at the DMV. You consider asking for help, but your Hebrew is limited to shalom, and where's the bathroom? Instead, you hover awkwardly, hoping someone will take pity on you. Spoiler, they won't. Eventually, a kind grandmotherly type gestures for you to use her bucket. You lower it into the well, praying it doesn't come back up with a frog or worse, nothing at all. The bucket hits water with a satisfying splash, and you haul it up, arms shaking like you just did a CrossFit class with Samson. The water is cool, slightly gritty, and tastes like hope mixed with limestone. You drink deeply, ignoring the suspicious floaty bits and the fact that everyone is watching you like you're the entertainment. Now, let's talk about rivers. You wander down to the nearest stream, only to discover that it's less babbling brook and more muddy trickle. The water is moving, barely, but it's also home to a thriving ecosystem of things that squirm. You weigh your options: dehydration, or a possible parasite that will haunt you for the next 40 years. You decide to risk it, scooping up water with your hands and filtering it through your sleeve, which is now both a sieve and a biohazard. And then there are cisterns, those mysterious stone-lined pits you keep stumbling over. Ancient people built these to collect rainwater, which sounds smart until you realize the last rain was sometime during the reign of King Saul. You peer inside, hoping for a miracle, but all you find is a puddle, a frog, and the overwhelming scent of disappointment. By now you understand why biblical folks wrote so many psalms about thirst. Water isn't just a beverage, it's a full-time job, a social event, and a minor miracle. You take another sip, savoring the taste of survival, and wonder if anyone in history has ever been this grateful for something that tastes like wet rocks. And as you wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, you realize you've survived your first biblical water quest. Sure, you might have swallowed a bug, but at least you didn't die of thirst. That's what we call a win. It's morning. You're hungry. There's no cereal, no coffee, and the only thing in your pouch is a handful of mysterious seeds. Time to figure out if you're about to invent granola or just poison yourself with wild figs. The sun is barely up, but your stomach is already staging a revolt. You reach for your pouch, hoping for something familiar, maybe a granola bar, or at least a sad, squished banana. Instead, you find seeds. Not the Instagrammable kind you sprinkle on avocado toast, but the kind that could either nourish you or send you on a vision quest you didn't sign up for. You look around for inspiration. The shepherds are already up, gnawing on something that looks suspiciously like last night's dinner. You consider asking what it is, but you remember the last time you tried ancient hospitality and ended up chewing on something described only as goat byproduct. You decide to take your chances with the local flora. You spot a fig tree. The figs are plump, purple, and, if you squint, almost appetizing. You pluck one, give it a cautious sniff, and take a bite. It's sweet, sticky, and full of tiny seeds that will haunt your teeth for hours. You feel a surge of hope. Maybe breakfast in biblical times isn't so bad after all. But then you remember the warnings. Not all figs are friendly. Some are wild, some are bitter, and some are just waiting to ruin your morning. You eye the next fig with suspicion, wondering if you're about to become a cautionary tale in someone else's scroll. You move on, scanning the landscape for anything else that might be edible. You spot some wild barley, growing in scraggly tufts between the rocks. You tear off a handful, chew thoughtfully, and immediately regret your life choices. It's like eating a handful of straw, but with more existential dread. You try to imagine the ancient Israelites wandering the desert, subsisting on manna, mysterious, flaky bread from heaven. You look up, just in case, but the only thing falling from the sky is dust. Desperate, you consider the seeds in your pouch. You pop a few into your mouth, hoping for a nutty, wholesome flavor. Instead, you get a mouthful of bitterness and regret. You spit them out, making a mental note to ask someone, anyone, what's actually safe to eat around here. You hear a buzzing sound and spot a cluster of bees hovering around a tree. Honey, the original energy gel. You approach cautiously, remembering that biblical honey comes with biblical bees, large, angry, and unimpressed by your modern sensibilities. You weigh your options, risk a few stings for a taste of sweetness, or accept your fate as the world's first hangry time traveler. You decide to go for it. You swipe a bit of honeycomb, dodging bees and dignity, and savor the golden, sticky reward. It's delicious, energizing, and just the right amount of dangerous. You feel a little bit like John the Baptist, minus the camel hair and existential dread. By now, you've assembled a breakfast of figs, barley, and stolen honey. It's not exactly a continental buffet, but it's enough to keep you going. You chew thoughtfully, watching the sun rise over the hills, and wonder if anyone in history has ever been this grateful for a handful of seeds and a near-death experience with bees. And as you finish your makeshift meal, you realize you've survived your first biblical breakfast. Sure, you might have eaten something mildly poisonous, but at least you didn't have to milk a goat before sunrise. That's what we call progress. The sun is rising, and so is your anxiety. You need shelter, but there's no Home Depot. Just rocks, sticks, and your own questionable ingenuity. Let's see if you can build something that won't collapse at the first sign of a goat. First, let's take stock of your resources. You have 2 hands, a vague memory of a YouTube video about primitive technology, and a growing suspicion that you should have paid more attention in Boy Scouts. The landscape is generous if you're a lizard. Rocks, thorny bushes, and the occasional palm frond. If you're hoping for a cozy log cabin, lower your expectations. This is less HGTV Dream Home and more Survivor Judean Edition. You start by looking for shade, because the sun is already threatening to turn your scalp into a burnt offering. There's a scraggly acacia tree nearby, but it's occupied by a goat with the confidence of a minor biblical king. You try to negotiate, but the goat is unmoved. You move on. Next, you gather rocks. Big rocks, small rocks, rocks that look suspiciously like ancient pottery shards. If you can lift it, it's coming with you. You stack them in a rough circle, congratulating yourself on your architectural prowess. It's not exactly the walls of Jericho, but it might keep out a determined breeze. Maybe. Now for the roof. You eye the palm fronds, which are conveniently located just out of reach. After a brief and undignified struggle involving a lot of jumping and one near miss with a thorn bush, you manage to collect a few. You drape them over your rock circle, creating what can only be described as rustic chic. The fronds provide shade, sort of, and will probably keep out at least 10% of the rain. If it rains, which it won't, because you're thirsty. For extra insulation, you pile on some dried grass and mud, channeling your inner Nehemiah. The mud is sticky, the grass is itchy, and your hands now look like you've been finger painting with Moses. You step back to admire your handiwork. It's a structure. It's not pretty, but it's yours. Let's talk about doors. There aren't any. You consider hanging a spare tunic over the entrance, but then remember you only have one tunic, and modesty is still a thing. Instead, you arrange a few more rocks to create a doorway, which is really just a gap you can awkwardly crawl through. Security is minimal, but so is your dignity at this point. As you settle in, you realize your new home has some unique features. Excellent ventilation, read giant holes, a natural skylight, read missing roof, and a built-in wildlife observation deck, read ants. You try to ignore the goat, who is now eyeing your shelter with envy, or possibly hunger. Night falls, and the temperature drops faster than your standards. You huddle inside, grateful for the meager protection your rock and frond palace provides. Every creak and rustle outside sounds like a Philistine raid, but it's probably just the goat, plotting revenge. You drift off to sleep, comforted by the knowledge that you've built something with your own 2 hands. Sure, it might collapse if you sneeze too hard, but for now, it's home. And if anyone asks, you'll just say, it's open concept. You hear a noise in the bushes. Is it a sheep, a lion, or just your stomach growling? Welcome to the ancient wilderness, where you're not always at the top of the food chain. Let's take a moment to appreciate just how many things in biblical times wanted to eat you. In the modern world, your biggest wildlife threat is a raccoon in your garbage can, or maybe a goose with anger issues at the park. Here, the stakes are higher, much higher. The lions and bears and leopards, oh my. Situation is not just a Sunday school story. It's your daily reality. And unlike your neighbor's cat, these animals don't want to cuddle. You scan the horizon, clutching a stick that you're optimistically calling a staff. The shepherds nearby look relaxed, but you notice they're all armed with slings, rocks, and the kind of confidence that only comes from surviving multiple lion encounters before breakfast. You, on the other hand, are wondering if you can fend off a wild animal with a stern look and some passive-aggressive muttering. The first rule of ancient wilderness survival: never assume it's just a sheep. Sure, sheep are everywhere, but so are jackals, wolves, and the occasional bear with a bad attitude. You remember that David, before he was king, fought off lions and bears with his bare hands. You, meanwhile, are considering hiding behind the nearest bush and hoping for divine intervention. You move quietly, trying not to sound like a wounded gazelle. Every twig snap is a potential disaster. You hear something rustling. Could be a rabbit, could be a hyena. You freeze, heart pounding, and try to remember if you read somewhere that making yourself look bigger scares off predators, or if that's just for awkward social encounters. Suddenly, a small, scruffy dog bursts out of the underbrush, barking at absolutely nothing. You jump 3 feet in the air, then try to play it cool as the shepherds laugh quietly in your direction. The dog, apparently satisfied with its performance, trots off to chase a lizard. You, meanwhile, are left with a racing heart and a renewed respect for anyone who survived long enough to write a psalm. But the real danger comes at night. When the sun goes down, the wilderness comes alive with eyes that glow in the dark and noises that sound suspiciously like the soundtrack to a horror movie. You huddle close to the fire, clutching your stick, and try to look unappetizing. The shepherds tell stories of leopards snatching sheep and hyenas with a taste for sandals. You nod along, pretending you're not planning to sleep with one eye open. You realize that in biblical times, sleep tight is less about cozy blankets and more about not becoming a midnight snack. You pile rocks around your sleeping spot just in case and whisper a prayer for protection. You're not sure if it's working, but you do feel slightly better. And as the night wears on and the wild sounds fade into the background, you realize you've survived another day without getting mauled. Sure, you may have screamed at a squirrel, but at least you're still in one piece. In the ancient wilderness, that's a victory worth celebrating, preferably from the safety of a very tall tree. Your clothes are minimal. The sun is relentless, and you're starting to realize why everyone in ancient art looks like they're wearing curtains. Time to wrap yourself up and pray for a breeze. Let's take a moment to appreciate your current look. A tunic that's basically a glorified potato sack, a belt that's seen better centuries, and sandals that are more aspirational than functional. You're not just underdressed, you're underprotected, underwhelmed, and starting to understand why ancient Israelites were so into sackcloth and ashes. It's not a fashion statement. It's just what happens when your wardrobe is limited to whatever didn't get eaten by moths. The sun beats down, turning your scalp into a frying pan and your shoulders into a cautionary tale. You try to adjust your tunic, but there's only so much you can do with a rectangle of linen and a prayer. You eye the locals, who are swaddled in layers of fabric. looking both mysterious and frankly a little smug. They've mastered the art of desert chic, loose, flowing robes that catch every stray breeze and keep the sun at bay. You, on the other hand, are one strong gust away from a wardrobe malfunction that would get you excommunicated from the synagogue. You consider your options. Do you try to fashion a head covering out of your sleeve? Do you double up on tunics and risk heat stroke, or go minimalist and risk sunburn in places you didn't know could burn? You remember reading somewhere that linen breathes, but right now it feels more like it's just gasping for air along with you. Let's talk about sandals. Yours are already falling apart, the straps digging into your feet like ancient torture devices. Every step is a negotiation with the gravel, and you're starting to envy the barefoot prophets. You spot a local cobbler, basically a guy with a knife and a pile of goat hides, and wonder if you can barter for an upgrade. You check your pouch for valuables and find a rock and a slightly used fig. You decide to tough it out. As the day wears on, you discover the true genius of biblical fashion. Layers, not for style, but for survival. Each layer traps a bit of air, creating a portable climate control system that's only slightly less effective than standing in a refrigerator. You wrap yourself up, feeling a little like a burrito and a lot like someone who's about to start a new religious movement. And then there's modesty. Ancient dress codes are strict, and you're constantly worried about flashing an ankle or, heaven forbid, a knee. You try to sit gracefully, but your tunic rides up, and you spend the next 5 minutes rearranging yourself like a fidgety toddler in church. You finally settle into a position that's both modest and only mildly uncomfortable. By sunset, you're sweaty, dusty, and convinced that biblical fashion was invented by someone who hated comfort but loved a good breeze. You may not look like a prophet, but you've survived a day in the desert without scandalizing the neighbors or bursting into flames. That's a win for both survival and modesty. You finally find a well, but it's crowded. Turns out water is the original social media. Let's see if you can make friends, avoid enemies, and not get trampled by a donkey. The well is the beating heart of biblical village life, a place where news travels faster than a Roman chariot, and reputations are made or ruined before you've even had your first sip. You approach, parched and hopeful, only to realize you've stumbled into the ancient equivalent of a high school cafeteria. There are cliques, shepherds with their sheep, women balancing jars on their heads with the grace of Olympic gymnasts, and a couple of elders who look like they haven't smiled since the Exodus. You try to blend in, but your "I just woke up in 1000 BC" look is hard to disguise. The locals size you up, silently judging your lack of bucket, rope, and basic hydration etiquette. You hover at the edge, trying to look casual, but you're about as subtle as a Philistine at a Passover dinner. The line for the well moves at the speed of biblical prophecy, slow, mysterious, and occasionally interrupted by livestock drama. A donkey cuts in front of you, its owner oblivious, and you're forced to negotiate with a creature whose negotiation skills are limited to braying and strategic flatulence. You consider asserting yourself, but then remember that in this era, donkeys have more social capital than you do. Finally, it's your turn. You fumble with the communal bucket, trying not to drop it in. The crowd watches, equal parts amused and horrified, as you lower the bucket with all the grace of a sleep-deprived toddler. You haul it up, arms trembling, and manage to spill only half the water on your tunic. Congratulations, you're now both hydrated and fashionably damp. While you drink, you realize the well isn't just about water. It's about networking. The women are exchanging news about whose goat wandered off. The shepherds are debating the best grazing spots. And the elders are reminiscing about the good old days when manna fell from the sky and nobody had to wait in line. You try to join a conversation, but your small talk skills are rusty. Nice weather we're having, you offer, gesturing vaguely at the relentless sun. The group nods politely, then returns to discussing the finer points of barley cultivation. You overhear a heated debate about whether figs or dates make a better breakfast, and you're tempted to weigh in with your recent traumatic fig experience. But before you can, a small child tugs at your sleeve and offers you a piece of bread. You accept, realizing that sometimes the best way to make friends is to accept carbs. As you finish your water, you notice a newcomer approaching the well, looking just as lost as you did. You give them a sympathetic nod, passing on the ancient tradition of awkward solidarity. The well may be crowded, chaotic, and occasionally dangerous, but it's also where you find community, one bucket at a time. You leave the well a little less thirsty, a little more sunburned, and with a new appreciation for the social complexities of ancient hydration. And as you walk away, you can't help but think, in biblical times, water really is life, and the well is where it all happens. You're hungry again. The figs are out of season, the olives are bitter, and you're pretty sure that plant is either food or a laxative. Time to channel your inner locust. Let's be honest, snacking in biblical times is not for the faint of heart or the weak of stomach. There's no vending machine humming in the corner, no secret stash of trail mix in your backpack, and definitely no grab-and-go section at the local market. Here, snack time is less about satisfying a craving and more about surviving until your next questionable meal. You start your foraging adventure with optimism and a stick, poking around the underbrush for anything remotely edible. The first thing you find is a cluster of wild berries. They look delicious, but you hesitate. Are they the kind that taste sweet and refreshing, or the kind that send you on a spiritual journey you didn't sign up for? You remember the ancient rule: if the birds eat it, you probably can too. You watch a sparrow peck at a berry, wait a few minutes to see if it drops dead, and then cautiously pop one in your mouth. It's tart, a little gritty, and, miracle of miracles, you're still alive. Next, you spot a patch of wild herbs. You recognize thyme and maybe some mint, but there's also something that looks suspiciously like poison hemlock. You decide to play it safe and stick with the mint, chewing on a few leaves and pretending you're at a fancy spa instead of a dusty hillside. The flavor is strong, the texture is leafy, and you're pretty sure your breath is now the freshest in all of ancient Israel. You move on to the olive trees. The olives are small, green, and so bitter they could strip paint off a chariot. You try one anyway, because hunger makes you bold. The taste is aggressively unpleasant, but you manage to choke it down, telling yourself it's an acquired taste. You make a mental note to thank whoever eventually invents olive oil and spitting out pits in public. Desperate, you eye a patch of wild roots. You dig one up, brush off the dirt, and take a tentative nibble. It's crunchy, earthy, and vaguely reminiscent of that time you accidentally ate a crayon as a kid. Still, it fills the void, and you're grateful for anything that isn't moving or covered in thorns. And then, just as you're about to give up, you spot a swarm of locusts. Yes, actual locusts, the biblical snack that's high in protein and low in dignity. You remember hearing that John the Baptist survived on these, along with wild honey. You manage to catch one, roast it over your tiny fire, and take a bite. It's crunchy, nutty, and surprisingly not terrible. You feel a strange sense of accomplishment, like you've unlocked a new level of ancient snacking. By the end of your foraging adventure, you've assembled a snack platter that would make any modern foodie weep. Wild berries, bitter olives, mint leaves, questionable roots, and a single, heroic locust. You chew thoughtfully, savoring the flavors of survival and the knowledge that you haven't poisoned yourself yet. And as you finish your ancient snack, you realize you've officially joined the ranks of biblical foragers. Sure, you might have eaten something that doubles as livestock laxative, but at least you're not hungry anymore. In the world of ancient snacks, that's a 5-star review. You smell biblical. Bathing is a luxury, soap is a fantasy, and the river is full of things that bite. Let's talk about hygiene, ancient style. First, let's address the obvious. You're not winning any freshness awards out here. After a few days in the biblical sun, you've developed a scent that could clear a synagogue. Your skin is sticky, your hair is crunchy, and your armpits have achieved a level of funk that would make a camel blush. You start to understand why incense was such a big deal in the Old Testament. You wander down to the nearest river, hoping for a quick dip. The water looks inviting, until you notice the frogs, the mysterious floating debris, and the unmistakable ripple of something with too many legs. You weigh your options, risk a rash, or embrace your new identity as that person in the village. You decide to go for it, wading in up to your knees, and immediately regret everything as a cold, slimy sensation wraps around your ankle. You leap out, dignity and cleanliness both in tatters. Soap, as you know it, does not exist. The closest thing is a lumpy grey paste made from ashes and animal fat, which smells like regret and feels like exfoliating with gravel. You try scrubbing with sand, which is effective if you're a pottery shard. Less so if you're a human with sensitive skin. You briefly consider using some fragrant herbs, but the only thing growing nearby is wild onion, and now you smell like a salad that's been left in the sun. You notice the locals have their own methods. Some rub their skin with olive oil and then scrape it off with a curved stick, a process that leaves you both shiny and slightly traumatized. Others simply rinse off in the rain, which is great if you enjoy standing around naked in a thunderstorm. You try both and discover that while olive oil is moisturizing, it also attracts every fly within a 5-mile radius. Laundry is another adventure. You beat your tunic against a rock, hoping to dislodge the worst of the dirt. The water turns a suspicious shade of brown, and your tunic now smells like eau de riverbank. You hang it up to dry, praying the wind will do what soap could not. Personal grooming is creative. Razors are rare, so beards are in, whether you like it or not. Haircuts are performed with knives, sharp stones, or the occasional bored cousin. You try to trim your own hair and end up with a style best described as prophet chic. You consider starting a new trend, but the locals just shake their heads and offer you a hat. By the end of the week, you've accepted your fate. You're not clean, but you're not dead. And in biblical times, that's a win. You mask your scent with a handful of wild mint, avoid standing downwind of the elders, and remind yourself that even King David probably had days when he smelled like a sheep pen. So next time you step into a hot shower, remember, in ancient times, cleanish was the best you could hope for. And honestly, after a few days in the wilderness, even that feels like a miracle. Night falls, it's cold, you need fire, but you have no matches, no lighter, and no idea what you're doing. Let's see if you can invent s'mores before you freeze. The sun that spent all day roasting your skin has vanished, replaced by a chill that seeps into your bones. You're shivering, teeth chattering, and suddenly, that minimalist tunic feels like a cruel joke. You look around for inspiration, but the only thing burning is your envy of anyone who thought to bring a blanket. Fire isn't just a luxury out here. It's the difference between surviving the night and becoming a cautionary tale for future generations. You start with the basics. Gather fuel. There's no shortage of dry grass, twigs, and the occasional stick that looks suspiciously like it might still be alive. You pile them up, trying to remember every survival show you've ever half watched. Next comes the hard part, actually making a spark. You have no flint, no steel, and your only tool is a rock you picked up because it looked cool. You briefly consider rubbing 2 sticks together, but quickly realize that's harder than it looks on TV. After 5 minutes, your hands are sore, your patience is gone, and you're pretty sure you've invented a new form of self-torture. You glance at the shepherds nearby, who are already basking in the glow of a perfectly crackling fire. They make it look easy. Just a few practice strikes with flint and steel, and suddenly there's warmth, light, and the faint smell of roasting goat. You try to look nonchalant as you edge closer, hoping to borrow a spark. The shepherds notice, exchange knowing glances, and wordlessly hand you a glowing ember. You accept it with the gratitude of someone who's just been handed the keys to the kingdom. With your precious ember, you coax your pile of twigs into life. You blow gently, praying you don't snuff it out. Smoke curls upward, your eyes water, and then, miracle of miracles, a tiny flame appears. You feed it carefully, adding sticks and whispering encouragement like it's a nervous pet. The flame grows, and soon you're basking in the warmth of your very own fire. You feel a surge of pride, as if you've just discovered electricity. Now that you have fire, you realize its true magic. It's not just about warmth, though that's a big part of it. Fire means light in the darkness, a way to keep wild animals at bay, and a chance to cook something that isn't raw barley or questionable figs. You think about roasting something over the flames, maybe a locust, if you're feeling adventurous. S'mores are out of the question, unless you count honey and wild seeds sandwiched between 2 rocks. Spoiler, it's not the same. As you sit by your fire, watching the sparks drift up into the night sky, you understand why ancient people saw fire as a gift from the gods. It's survival, comfort, and a little bit of magic, all rolled into one. You wrap your tunic tighter, stretch your hands toward the flames, and feel, just for a moment, like you might actually make it through the night. Congratulations, you've unlocked the original life hack. And while you may not have invented s'mores, you've definitely earned a spot by the fire. You want bread. You have flour, water, and a questionable sense of hope. Time to slap some dough on a hot rock and pray for a miracle. Let's start with expectations. You're not about to whip up a crusty sourdough bully with an Instagram-worthy crumb. There's no oven, no yeast packet, and definitely no stand mixer. What you have is a handful of flour, a splash of water, and the kind of optimism that only comes from hunger-induced desperation. Welcome to the world of ancient flatbread, where every meal is a culinary gamble and every bite is a lesson in humility. First, you mix your flour and water in a bowl, or more likely, a hollowed-out stone or the least dirty corner of your tunic. The dough is sticky, lumpy, and about as appetizing as wet clay. You knead it with your hands, which are now covered in a paste that will haunt your fingernails for days. There's no salt, no olive oil, and definitely no gluten-free options. This is bread at its most basic, survival, not celebration. Now comes the tricky part, baking. You scan the landscape for anything that might pass as an oven. There's nothing but rocks, sand, and the faint hope that you can harness the power of the sun. You remember seeing locals bake bread by slapping dough onto the sides of a hot clay oven. But you don't have a clay oven. You have a rock. So you build a small fire, wait for the flames to die down, and place your chosen rock in the embers, praying it doesn't explode or attract a curious goat. Once the rock is hot, really hot, not just warm bath hot, you flatten your dough into a thin disc and slap it on the surface. It sizzles, bubbles, and immediately sticks. You watch anxiously, poking at the edges with a stick, hoping it will magically transform into something edible. After a few minutes, you flip it over, revealing a side that's somewhere between golden brown and charred offering. You repeat the process, making a few more rounds, each one slightly less tragic than the last. The result, something that looks like a cross between a tortilla and a coaster, is chewy, smoky, and tastes mostly of hope and ash. You tear off a piece, blow off the worst of the grit, and take a bite. It's not bad, especially if you haven't eaten in a while, and your standards have plummeted to anything that isn't a raw barley stalk. You realize why bread is such a big deal in ancient stories. It's not just food, it's a daily miracle, a product of patience, persistence, and a willingness to eat whatever comes off the rock. You start to appreciate the ingenuity of people who figured out how to make something nourishing out of almost nothing, day after day, generation after generation. As you finish your meal, you look at your flour-dusted hands and your pile of slightly burnt flatbreads. You may not have invented the next food trend, but you've managed to feed yourself with nothing but the basics and the hot rock. In biblical times, that's not just survival. It's a small, smoky victory. You spot a goat. Is it dinner, a pet, or a future lawsuit waiting to happen? Welcome to the complicated world of ancient livestock. At first glance, the goat seems harmless enough. Just a fuzzy, four-legged lawnmower, nibbling on whatever passes for grass in this rocky landscape. But don't be fooled. In biblical times, goats are more than just background scenery. They're currency, status symbols, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and starvation. They're also, as you're about to learn, agents of chaos with horns. You approach the goat, hoping for a friendly encounter. The goat, however, has other plans. It eyes you with a mixture of suspicion and mischief, as if it's weighing whether to let you scratch its head or headbutt you into next week. You remember stories of ancient patriarchs, Abraham, Jacob, and the rest, who seemed to have their lives together, herding flocks across the hills. What those stories don't mention is the daily struggle of convincing a goat to do anything it doesn't want to do. You consider your options. On one hand, goats are incredibly useful. They provide milk, meat, hides, and even a kind of companionship if you're into stubborn, opinionated animals. Herding goats could mean a steady supply of food and maybe even a little respect from the local shepherds. On the other hand, goats are notorious escape artists. Turn your back for a second and they'll be halfway, up a cliff, chewing on your only spare tunic. You try to lead the goat with a handful of grass, channeling your inner shepherd. The goat follows for about 3 steps, then decides the grass is boring and your sandal looks tastier. You quickly learn that herding is less about leading and more about negotiating, bribing, and occasionally begging. You watch the seasoned shepherds work their magic, whistling and gesturing as their goats obediently fall in line. You attempt the same, but your goat just stares at you, unimpressed. Then there's the social aspect. In the ancient world, livestock is wealth, and a person, with a healthy herd is someone to be reckoned with. But with great goats comes great responsibility. Lose a goat, and you're not just out a meal. You might owe your neighbour a replacement, or worse, face a stern talking to from the village elders. Goats have a knack for getting into trouble, raiding gardens, knocking over water jars, and occasionally wandering into sacred spaces where they absolutely do not belong. You weigh your choices. Do you embrace the goat herding lifestyle with all its challenges and rewards? Or do you cut your losses, let the goat roam free, and hope it doesn't come back with a posse of equally troublesome friends? Either way, you're now part of a tradition stretching back thousands of years, a reluctant participant in the eternal dance between human and goat. As the sun sets, you sit beside your new frenemy, sharing a moment of mutual distrust and grudging respect. Whether you end up with milk, meat, or just a good story, one thing is clear. In the ancient world, every goat is both a blessing and a conundrum. And if you're lucky, you'll survive long enough to tell the tale, preferably with both sandals intact. You need supplies. The market is chaos. Everyone is yelling. Nobody takes credit cards, and you're about to trade your last sandal for a handful of dates. Welcome to the ancient marketplace, a swirling, shouting, sensory overload where the only thing more confusing than the prices is the currency itself. You step into the fray, clutching your meager possessions and trying to look like you belong. The air is thick with the smell of spices, sweat, and the faint hope that you won't get swindled before breakfast. Assess your assets. You take stock of your wealth. One slightly worn sandal, a pouch with 3 mysterious seeds, half a fig, questionable freshness. The tunic on your back, not up for grabs. Yet, you eye the stalls, each one overflowing with things you desperately want. Bread, dried fish, olives, maybe even a scrap of cheese if you're feeling lucky. The vendors eye you back, sizing up your bargaining power with the precision of a seasoned camel trader. Learn the lingo bartering isn't just about what you have, it's about how you ask. You listen in as locals haggle, their voices rising and falling in a rhythm that's half argument, half performance. You try to mimic the tone. How much for the bread? That's outrageous. My grandmother bakes better for less. I'll give you this sandal and a blessing for 2 loaves. The vendor laughs, counter-offers with a handful of dates, and you realize you're in for a long morning. Master the art of the trade. You quickly learn the rules. Never accept the first offer. That's just the starting point for a negotiation that could last longer than the Exodus. Feign indifference. Act like you don't really need that bread, even as your stomach growls loud enough to attract stray dogs. Bundle deals. Throw in a handful of olives and I'll toss in these seeds. Very rare, possibly magical. You swap your sandal for dates, your seeds for a chunk of cheese, and your dignity for a slightly better price on a loaf of bread. You're not sure who got the better deal, but you're fed, and your feet are only mildly offended. Avoid the pitfalls. The market is full of distractions and dangers. Pickpockets, watch your pouch. Overzealous vendors, don't get guilted into buying a goat. Mystery meat, if you have to ask, you probably don't want it. You dodge a runaway chicken, sidestep a heated debate over lentil prices, and nearly trip over a child selling miracle water. Spoiler, it's just water. Celebrate your victories. You leave the market with a handful of dates, a chunk of cheese, a loaf of bread, no sandals, but a great story. You may not have mastered the ancient economy, but you've survived the chaos, made a few trades, and learned that sometimes the best currency is a good sense of humor. As you munch on your hard-won snacks, you realize In the biblical marketplace, everyone's hustling, nobody's rich, and the real prize is making it out with both your lunch and your dignity, mostly intact. It's bedtime. Your options are limited. A rock, some sand, or the vague promise of a straw mat. Let's see if you can get comfortable before the scorpions do. You survey your bedroom with the weary resignation of someone who's just realized that thread count is a modern invention. There's a rock that looks almost pillow-shaped if you squint and ignore the lichen. The sand is soft, but you know from experience that it gets everywhere, and you're not eager to spend the night exfoliating your entire body. Somewhere in the distance, you spot what might be a straw mat, but it's currently occupied by a goat who's not in the mood to negotiate. You weigh your options. The rock pros. Elevated, unlikely to harbor insects, doubles as a weapon if you're attacked in the night. Cons. Hard, lumpy, and will leave your neck feeling like you wrestled an angel and lost. The sand pros. Molds to your body, warm, at least at first, and easy to brush aside for a quick bed reset. Cons. Cold by midnight, home to all sorts of crawling things, and you'll be finding sand in your ears for weeks. The straw mat pros. Actual luxury by ancient standards, provides a barrier between you and the ground, and smells only mildly of goat. Cons. Not yours. Currently guarded by a goat with trust issues. You decide to try your luck with the sand, reasoning that at least it won't bruise your spine. You clear a patch, carefully checking for scorpions, beetles, and anything else that might want to share your sleeping space. You pile up your cloak for a makeshift pillow, wrap yourself tightly to ward off the chill, and lie down, staring up at a sky so full of stars, it almost makes you forget you're basically camping in a litter box. Just as you're drifting off, you feel something tickle your ankle. You leap up, heart pounding, and discover it's only a stray blade of grass. Or so you hope. You check your bed again, this time with the thoroughness of someone who's heard one too many stories about desert critters. Satisfied, or at least resigned, you settle back in, determined to get at least a few hours of sleep before sunrise. The night is full of sounds, distant howls, the soft bleating of sheep, and the unmistakable crunch of a goat chewing on your sandal. You pull your cloak tighter, trying to ignore the fact that every rock under your back feels like it was placed there by a particularly vindictive angel. Eventually, exhaustion wins out. You drift into a fitful sleep, dreaming of feather beds and warm blankets, only to be woken by the first rays of sun and the realization that you've survived another night without becoming a midnight snack for the local wildlife. You rise, brush the sand from your hair, and stretch your aching limbs. You may not have slept well, but you slept. In the world of ancient sleeping arrangements, that's as good as it gets. And hey, at least you didn't have to fight the goat for the mat. It's raining, your shelter leaks, your clothes are soaked, and you're starting to wonder if Noah had the right idea. Time to improvise ancient style. Let's set the scene. You've survived the sun, the wild animals, and the questionable snacks. Now, the heavens have opened up, and you're discovering a new level of discomfort. Your shelter, a few sticks and a hide, optimistically called a tent, has all the waterproofing of a colander. Water drips steadily onto your forehead. Your bedding is now a sponge, and your tunic clings to you like a cold, wet shroud. You're not sure if you're shivering from the chill or from the realization that you may never be dry again. You look around for inspiration. The locals seem unfazed, huddling under their cloaks and muttering about the blessing of rain. You try to channel their stoicism, but mostly you just channel water into your shoes. You consider building an ark, but all you have is a stick, a rock, and a goat, who's just as miserable as you are. Ancient rain survival tips that may or may not work. Upgrade your shelter. Pile on more branches, leaves, or animal hides. The goal is to create something vaguely waterproof, or at least less leaky than your current setup. If you're lucky, you'll end up with a hut that's only damp instead of drenched. Fashion a cloak. If you have a spare cloak or blanket, drape it over yourself like a human burrito. Bonus points if it's made of wool. Wet wool is heavy and smelly, but at least it keeps you warm. Sort of. Dig a trench. Channel your inner engineer and dig a shallow trench around your shelter to divert water away. Congratulations, you've just invented ancient drainage. Find high ground. Move your camp to a slightly higher spot. It won't stop the rain, but at least you won't wake up floating downstream. Embrace the soggy life. Sometimes you just have to accept your fate. Dance in the rain, sing a psalm, and hope the sun comes out before you grow moss. The social side of soaking rain is the great equalizer. Suddenly, everyone is in the same soggy boat. The elders grumble, the children splash in puddles, and the goats look personally offended by the weather. You bond with your fellow survivors over shared misery and the universal hope that tomorrow will be dry. You start to see why rain is such a big deal in ancient texts. It's a blessing when you need it, a curse when you don't, and always a reminder that you're not in charge of the weather. You wrap yourself tighter, wring out your sleeves, and try to remember the last time you were truly dry. As the storm finally passes and the clouds part, you emerge from your shelter, blinking in the pale sunlight. Your clothes are still damp, your hair is a disaster, but you've made it through another biblical trial. You may not have built an ark, but you've survived the rain, ancient style. And next time, you'll be the first to volunteer for firewood duty, indoors. You hear a buzz. It's not your phone. It's a swarm of locusts. Let's talk about pest control, biblical edition. At first, it's just a faint hum on the horizon. You squint into the sun, hoping it's just the wind, or maybe a distant herd of sheep with unusually synchronized sneezing. But no, the sound grows louder, the sky darkens, and suddenly you're living in a live-action version of one of the less fun plagues. Welcome to the locust situation, where dinner is cancelled and the bugs are eating better than you. Locusts, the ancient apocalypse. Locusts aren't just bugs. They're a force of nature. 1 minute you're admiring your modest patch of barley. The next, it's been mowed down to stubble by 1 million tiny mandibles. Forget about salads. Forget about bread. And definitely forget about that fig tree you were saving for a special occasion. Locusts don't discriminate. If it's green, it's gone. Pest control, 1000 BC style. You look around for solutions. There's no pesticide, no bug zapper, and the only organic method is screaming and waving your arms. Here are your options. Noise and smoke. The locals light smoky fires and bang pots, hoping to drive the swarm away. The locusts are unimpressed. You end up smelling like burnt goat hair and still lose your crops. Prayer. You join the elders in a heartfelt plea to the heavens. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the locusts just seem to eat faster. Physical barriers. You try covering your plants with nets or baskets. The locusts laugh in tiny, crunchy voices and find a way in anyway. Resignation. You accept your fate, watch your dinner disappear, and start brainstorming recipes for locust surprise. If you can't beat them, eat them. Here's the plot twist. In biblical times, locusts are actually considered kosher. That's right. What doesn't kill your crops might just make you stronger. and slightly crunchy. You join the locals in gathering the little invaders, roasting them over your hard-won fire, and seasoning them with a pinch of wild herbs. The taste? Nutty, protein-packed, and surprisingly satisfying when you're out of options. By the time the locusts move on, you're left with a barren field, a new appreciation for ancient resilience, and a handful of roasted bugs. You swap locust recipes with your neighbors, joke about starting a locust jerky business, and vow to plant twice as much next season, just in case. In the end, you learn the ultimate lesson of biblical pest control. Sometimes dinner eats you, but if you're clever and a little bit hungry, you might just eat dinner right back. The sun is relentless. You're sweating through your robe, and your only hope is a scraggly bush. Welcome to the ancient art of not getting sunburned. Forget everything you know about sunscreen, wide-brimmed hats, and those little beach umbrellas that double as Instagram props. Out here, the only thing standing between you and a biblical sunburn is your wits, your wardrobe, and whatever shrubbery you can find that isn't already occupied by a lizard. The scraggly bush. It's not much, but it's home. For you and, apparently, a family of beetles. You crouch beneath its meager branches, trying to convince yourself that a few leaves are enough to block out the sun. Spoiler, they're not. But it's better than nothing. The lone olive tree, the Cadillac of ancient shade. If you spot one, claim it fast. Just be prepared to share with every shepherd, goat, and wandering philosopher in the area. A large rock. Not exactly cool, but if you sit on the shadowy side, you might avoid roasting your backside. Bonus. Rocks don't bite, usually. Your own robe. When all else fails, channel your inner desert nomad. Drape your robe over your head and shoulders, creating a makeshift tent. You'll look mysterious, and more importantly, avoid turning into a human raisin. Layer up. Counterintuitive, but true. The more fabric between you and the sun, the better. Loose, light-colored robes are your best friend. Think fashionable ghost, not sweaty tourist. Stay low, stay still. The closer you are to the ground, the cooler it gets. Find a spot, hunker down, and move as little as possible. Ancient wisdom. He who naps in the heat does not faint in the street. Time your travels. Only the truly desperate, or the truly clueless, travel at high noon. Early morning and late afternoon are prime time for moving. Midday is for shade, snacks, and existential reflection. Even the best shade is only a partial solution. Drink water whenever you can, and if you run out, start eyeing those prickly desert plants with new interest. Just don't eat anything unless you're sure it's not a cactus with an attitude. After a day of dodging sunbeams and fighting for a spot under the world's saddest bush, you'll probably still end up a little crispy. Consider it a rite of passage, your official welcome to the ancient world. Besides, nothing says I survived biblical times like a sunburn in the shape of a fig leaf. So next time you grumble about forgetting your SPF 50, remember, your ancestors survived with nothing but a robe, a rock, and a dream. And maybe, just maybe, a really good bush. You finally have water, but how do you carry it? Time to wrestle with animal skins, leaky pouches, and the eternal question, is this thing clean? Forget your sleek, BPA-free water bottle. In the ancient world, hydration comes courtesy of a goat, or sheep, or cow, who has generously donated its hide to the cause. The water skin is the original canteen, a stitched-together pouch that's equal parts practical and, let's say, aromatic. Pros: portable, flexible, and holds a surprising amount of water. Cons: smells like a barnyard, leaks if you look at it wrong, and cleaning it is a spiritual experience. You approach the well, river, or communal jug with your water skin in hand. Filling it is a delicate dance. Open the neck, which is exactly what it sounds like, sometimes with a stopper, sometimes just a twist of rawhide. Submerge or pour water in, hoping the seams hold. Tie it off with a knot that you pray will not come undone halfway back to camp. You watch as a few drops immediately seep out. Is it a slow leak or just character? You decide not to think about it. Short answer, probably not. Long answer, definitely not. Cleaning options: swish with river water, rinse with a handful of sand, or, if you're feeling fancy, scrub with a little salt and hope for the best. Taste test. If it smells more like goat than water, you're doing it right by ancient standards. You sling the water skin over your shoulder, feeling like a true nomad. Every step is accompanied by the gentle slosh-slosh of water and the faint aroma of livestock. You take a sip, trying not to think about the last time this skin was properly cleaned. The water is warm, a little gritty, and tastes faintly of yesterday's stew. But it's wet, and that's what matters. Leaky seams, patch with wax, resin, or a prayer to the nearest water deity. Uninvited guests. Occasionally, a bug or two finds its way in. Consider it extra protein. Sharing. Everyone wants a sip. Ancient hydration is a communal affair, so get used to passing it around and pretending you don't notice the backwash. If you're lucky or rich, you might score a clay jug or a bronze vessel, but for most, it's water skin or bust. And honestly, after a few days, you start to appreciate the rustic charm. Plus, it doubles as a makeshift pillow in a pinch. The water skin is the unsung hero of ancient survival. It's not pretty, it's not sterile, but it gets the job done. So drink up, ignore the goat aftertaste, and be grateful you're not lugging water one handful at a time. Hydration, biblical style. Not glamorous, but absolutely essential. You're starving. The neighbors are cooking something that smells edible. Time to master the ancient art of dropping hints and hoping for leftovers. Let's be honest. In the ancient world, dinner plans are less about RSVPs and more about survival instincts. You catch a whiff of roasting meat and fresh bread drifting over the wall, and suddenly your own foraged roots and wild onions seem even more tragic. The question is, how do you score an invite without looking desperate? Or worse, getting mistaken for a wandering prophet in need of a bath? You stroll past your neighbor's tent, whistling a tune that says, "I'm just out for a casual walk, not casing your dinner table." You pause, inhale deeply, and sigh just loud enough to be heard. Maybe you mention, to no one in particular, how the wild figs have been especially disappointing this year. If you're lucky, someone will take pity and wave you over. If subtlety fails, it's time to engage. You compliment the aroma wafting from their fire. Is that lamb I smell? Or have the angels blessed your kitchen? You ask about their day, their family, their goats, anything to linger near the food without actually drooling. If you're feeling bold, you might even mention how you've been fasting, for spiritual reasons, of course. Desperation calls for creativity. You casually mention that you haven't eaten since sunrise, and that your last meal was mostly sand and regret. You offer to help with chores, fetch water, or entertain the children with your best impression of a hungry locust. Ancient hospitality is legendary, but sometimes it needs a little nudge. Luckily, in biblical times, hospitality is a sacred duty. Turning away a hungry traveler is frowned upon, almost as much as serving undercooked goat. If your neighbors have even a shred of decency, or just want to hear your latest story about wrestling a goat for a straw mat, you'll be ushered in, handed a bowl, and treated to the finest meal they can spare. You've made it to the table. Now's your chance to shine. Praise everything. The bread is divine, the stew is miraculous, even the water tastes like a blessing. Eat with enthusiasm, but not like you've never seen food before. Offer a story or a song in return. Ancient dinners are as much about entertainment as calories. Help clean up. Nothing says, "Invite me back," like a guest who scrapes the pots. You leave with a full belly, a few new friends, and maybe even an invite for next time. Sure, you had to drop more hints than a prophet in disguise, but you've survived another day and learned that sometimes the best meal is the one you didn't have to cook or barter your last sandal for. In the ancient world, hospitality is a gamble, but with the right mix of charm, humility, and strategic hunger, you can almost always find a seat at someone else's table. Just remember to return the favor, because next time, you might be the one with the only edible stew in town. It's dark, the fire is dying, and every noise sounds like a Philistine. Let's talk about ancient security systems, mostly yelling and hoping for the best. The sun has set, the goats are mostly accounted for, and you're ready to collapse after a long day of surviving biblical inconveniences. But as the shadows stretch and the night air cools, a new problem creeps in. Safety. Out here, there are no locks, no motion sensor lights, and definitely no call 911 option. Your security system is as ancient as your sleeping mat. If you're lucky, it's a stick and a suspicious attitude. The ancient night watch starter pack a dying fire. The flicker of flames keeps wild animals at bay, until it sputters out and you're left with nothing but glowing embers and wishful thinking. A big stick, the original home defense tool. Keep it close. Swing first, apologize later. A rotating watch. If you're traveling with others, congratulations. You've just invented the night shift. Take turns staying awake, poking the fire, and glaring into the darkness. Bonus points if you can stay awake past midnight. A loud voice. When in doubt, yell. Yell at suspicious noises, at wandering livestock, at your own imagination. Sometimes the best defense is convincing the darkness that you're more trouble than you're worth. What's out there? Wild animals, jackals, wolves, and the occasional lion. Most are more interested in your goats than you, but you're not taking chances. Bandits. The ancient world's answer to stranger danger. They travel light, move fast, and love unattended supplies. Neighboring tribes, sometimes friendly, sometimes not. Every rustle in the bushes could be a neighbor or a neighbor's goat. Security tips, circa 1000 BC. Circle the wagons or goats. Sleep in a tight group with your valuables and the most edible looking members in the center. Strategic snoring. A loud snorer can sound like a whole army. If you've got one, put them on the perimeter. Booby traps, optional. A few strategically placed thorn branches or noisy pottery shards can buy you precious seconds, or at least give you a good story. The reality, sleep interrupted. You lie down, one eye open, clutching your stick and listening to the symphony of the night. Distant howls, the crackle of dying embers, and the occasional snort from a sleeping companion. Every snap of a twig sends your heart racing. Was that a Philistine? A wild dog? Or just your imagination running wild? Eventually, exhaustion wins. You drift into a light, twitchy sleep, dreaming of sturdy doors and well-lit streets. When dawn finally breaks, you're stiff, groggy, and grateful to see another day. Ancient security system status, alarm, your own voice. locks, your grip on a stick, surveillance, one eye open, peace of mind, sold out since the Bronze Age. But hey, you survived the night, and in the ancient world, that's the only security guarantee you really need. You spot a camel. It looks friendly, but also smells like regret. Should you try to ride it, or just accept your fate as a pedestrian? Welcome to the crossroads of ancient travel. The camel, a creature that's equal parts miracle of desert engineering and walking cautionary tale. You eye its long lashes and lumpy silhouette, weighing your options as the sun beats down and your feet remind you they were not designed for marathon treks across rocky wastelands. Ride the Camel Pro's speed. Camels can cover distances that would leave you weeping in the sand. Shade. Sitting atop a camel, you're at least a few feet farther from the blazing ground. Status. Nothing says I've made it in the ancient world like rolling up to the market on a camel. Cons. The smell. Imagine a barnyard, a gym sock, and a hint of fermented hay. Now multiply by 10. The attitude. Camels are famous for their opinions, and most of them are about how much they dislike being ridden. The ride. Comfortable is not a word anyone has ever used to describe a camel saddle. Prepare for a bumpy, lurching journey that will test your core strength and your dignity. Remain a pedestrian prose. Control. You decide when to stop, where to go, and how often to complain. No surprises. Your feet may ache, but at least they won't spit at you. Simplicity. No need to learn the ancient art of camel mounting, which, by the way, is less graceful leap and more awkward scramble. Cons. Speed. You'll be left in the dust by every passing caravan. Heat. The sun is relentless, and there's no shade on the open road. Envy. Watching others glide by atop their desert ships, you may start to question your life choices. The mounting process. A humbling experience. If you choose to ride, prepare for a ritual that's part rodeo, part trustful. Wait for the camel to kneel. They don't always cooperate. Climb aboard quickly before it changes its mind. Hold on for dear life as it stands up in 2 dramatic lurching stages. Back legs first, then front. Try not to scream. The verdict, if you value speed, shade, and a story to tell your grandkids, swallow your pride and maybe your sense of smell, and ride the camel. If you prefer dignity, predictability, and not smelling like a barn for a week, stick to walking. Either way, you'll earn your place among the travelers of the ancient world, whether you're striding on sore feet or clinging to a camel, praying you don't fall off at the next sand dune. If you do ride, bring a cushion, and maybe a clothespin for your nose. It's festival time. The food is plentiful, the music is loud, and you're about to eat more lamb than you thought possible. Enjoy it. Tomorrow, it's back to lentils. The village is buzzing. Banners flutter, drums pound, and the air is thick with the smell of roasting meat and fresh-baked bread. For once, everyone's worries, drought, taxes, that one goat who keeps escaping, are put on hold. It's time to celebrate. The menu, a biblical banquet. You're used to humble fare, lentils, barley, maybe a fig if you're lucky. But tonight you eat like royalty. On the table, roast lamb, the centerpiece. Juicy, tender, and carved with the kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred scrolls. Fresh bread, not the rock-hard flatbread of daily life, but fluffy loaves, still warm from the communal oven. Olives and cheese, salty, tangy, and piled high in clay bowls. Figs, dates, and grapes, sweet enough to make you forget you haven't seen sugar yet. Wine, flowing freely, because water skins are for weekdays. The rituals, more than just food. Every dish has meaning. The lamb might be a Passover sacrifice, the bread unleavened for a reason, the wine poured with a blessing. You join in the prayers, the songs and the stories, some as old as the hills, some invented on the spot after a little too much wine. The vibe, communal joy music, flutes, lyres, and the occasional enthusiastic tambourine. Dancing, awkward at first, then contagious. Even the elders are clapping along. Laughter, loud, unfiltered, and echoing under the stars. You eat until you can't move, then eat a little more because Aunt Miriam insists you're too thin. You swap stories with neighbours, sneak an extra fig, and marvel at how, for one night, everyone feels rich. The aftermath, back to reality. As the fire dies down and the last song fades, you know tomorrow it's back to the usual. Lentils, chores, and that stubborn goat. But for now, you're full, happy, and a little bit sunburned. Festival lesson. Feasts are rare, but they're what you remember. They're proof that even in the hardest times, people find a way to celebrate, to share, and to eat like kings, if only for a night. Take an extra piece of bread for the road. You'll thank yourself when the lentils return. Disaster strikes. The well is empty, the river is gone, and you're about to learn the true meaning of pray without ceasing. The sun is high, your lips are cracked, and the bottom of the well stares back at you with nothing but dust and disappointment. The goats are looking at you like you're next on the menu. Welcome to the ancient world's worst case scenario. No water. You check the well again, still dry. You check the riverbed, still a riverbed, minus the river. You consider wringing out your robe for moisture. Don't. Gather the family, the neighbours, and anyone with a good rain dance. Everyone shares rumours. I heard there's a spring 2 days walk east. My cousin's cousin found water by digging under a fig tree. Every drop counts. Water is now more valuable than gold, sandals, or even a good story. The goats are not happy about their new diet of hope and dust. Send out the bravest or thirstiest to search for water. Tools, a stick, a pouch, and a prayer. Hopes, high. Odds, not so much. If the well's not giving, maybe there's water further down. Everyone grabs a shovel, a bucket, or just their hands. Blisters are guaranteed. Water is not. Pray. Loudly, often, and with feeling. Ancient wisdom says God listens especially closely when you're parched. Sacrifice. Some elders might suggest an offering. You eye your last fig and wonder if it's worth it. Collect dew. Lay out cloths at night and wring them out in the morning. It's not much, but it's something. Eat moisture-rich plants, cacti, wild melons, or anything that squishes when you squeeze it. Follow the animals. Birds and wildlife often know where to find hidden springs. Just hope you're faster than the jackals. You wait for rain. You watch the sky. You debate the merits of cloud shapes. Every distant rumble is a cause for celebration or heartbreak. Sometimes, just when you're ready to give up, a cloud appears, a spring bubbles up, or a stranger arrives with a full water skin. You celebrate, you drink, you thank the heavens, and you vow never to take a full well for granted again. When the well runs dry, you learn what it means to hope, hustle, and hydrate by any means necessary. And if you make it through, you'll never look at a glass of water the same way again. Your sandals are falling apart, the rocks are sharp, and you're starting to envy the barefoot prophets. Let's talk about ancient podiatry. You look down. What once passed for sandals are now little more than a few leather straps clinging desperately to your feet. The soles are worn thin, the thongs are fraying, and every step is a negotiation with the terrain. Pebbles wedge themselves under your toes. Thorns laugh at your pain. you start to wonder if wandering in the wilderness was just code for hobbling around with blisters. Ancient sandal technology, not exactly Nike materials, soles, usually made from rawhide, palm fiber, or, if you're fancy, thick leather. Straps, leather thongs, sometimes replaced with whatever stringy plant material is handy. Design, flat, open, and minimalist. No arch support, no cushioning, and definitely no memory foam. The only custom fit is how tightly you can tie the straps before cutting off circulation. Common sandal struggles, problem ancient solution, modern reaction. Strap snap retie with a knot or spare cord. Guess I'm barefoot now. Soles wear through, add another layer of hide, maybe. Is this tetanus country? Blisters and calluses ignore, toughen up, or use a rag. Where's my foot spa? Rocks and thorns, hop, curse, or pray. I miss socks. Podiatry, ancient style blister care. Pop it, wrap it, and keep walking. If you're lucky, someone has a bit of olive oil or honey to smear on. Callous pride. Thick, leathery soles are a badge of honor. The more you have, the less you feel. Going barefoot. Some prophets and ascetics skip sandals altogether. You briefly consider joining them until you step on a goat pellet. DIY repairs. MacGyver, Bronze Age edition. Extra straps. Always carry a spare bit of leather or plant fiber. You never know when you'll need an emergency fix. Stuffing. Pad the sole with grass, leaves, or even a scrap of old cloak. It's not pretty, but your feet will thank you. Trade up. Spot a merchant. Time to haggle for a new pair. Just be ready to pay in figs, stories, or your last good sandal. By the end of the day, your feet are sore, your sandals are a memory, and you have a new respect for anyone who managed to walk across the desert without complaining too much. Ancient podiatry wasn't glamorous, but it was tough, and so are you. Next festival, skip the extra fig and barter for new sandals. Your feet will sing your praises all the way home. You're finally asleep, but the rooster has other plans. Welcome to the original snooze button. Loud, feathery, and impossible to ignore. You've survived another night of sand, sticks, and suspicious rustling. Just as you slip into the deepest, most blissful sleep you've had in days, it happens. A piercing, triumphant cock-a-doodle-doo shatters the silence. You jolt awake, heart pounding, convinced for a split second that you're under attack. Nope. Just a local rooster doing what roosters do best. Ruining mornings since the Bronze Age. The ancient alarm clock. Features and bugs. Feature user experience. No off switch. Crowing starts before sunrise. Self-powered runs on bugs and attitude volume. Max. Can be heard in the next village snooze function none. Unless you count earplugs made of wool. The rooster's agenda announce the dawn. Loudly, repeatedly. Strut around like he owns the place, waking up every living thing within earshot. Inspire a chorus of complaints from sleep-deprived humans, goats, and dogs alike. Your options. Ancient snooze strategies. Bury your head under your cloak. It muffles the sound, but only slightly. Roosters are nothing if not persistent. Throw a sandal, gently. Not recommended. Roosters are surprisingly agile, and you'll just lose your footwear. Accept your fate. Get up, stretch, and join the rest of the village in a collective groan. At least you're all in this together. The silver lining. You're up with the sun. Productivity. Ancient style. You'll never oversleep, not even if you desperately want to. You get first pick at breakfast, assuming you can stomach food this early. Rooster wisdom. In the ancient world, the rooster is more than just a noisy neighbor. He's a symbol of vigilance, a herald of new beginnings, and a reminder that, like it or not, the day waits for no one. So next time you're woken by a feathery alarm clock, take a deep breath, curse quietly, and remember, befriend the rooster. If you can't beat him, at least maybe he'll let you sleep in on festival days. You made it through the night. The sun is rising, your stomach is rumbling, and you're ready to do it all over again. Congratulations. You're officially a survivor of biblical times. The sky glows pink and gold. Birds are already arguing in the trees. Somewhere, a goat is loudly reminding everyone that it exists. You stretch your aching limbs, brush the sand, or straw, or regret from your hair, and take a moment to appreciate the simple fact that you're still here. Stomach, rumbling, but functional. Feet, sore but attached. Clothes, slightly damp, slightly dusty, but still covering the essentials. Mind, equal parts exhausted and determined. Forget about pancakes or coffee. Breakfast is whatever you can scrounge up. Leftover bread, if you hid some from last night's feast. A handful of dried figs or dates. A cup of tepid water from your trusty, and still slightly goat-scented, water skin. Maybe a lentil or two if you're lucky. You eat slowly, savoring every bite, and try not to think about how many hours until the next meal. Check the animals. Are they still here? Are they plotting an escape? Tend the fire. If you're lucky, there are still a few embers left. Scout for water, because hydration is not optional. Patch your shelter. That leak isn't going to fix itself. Prepare for whatever the day throws at you. Sandstorm, locusts, surprise festival. Who knows? You've learned to sleep with one eye open. Eat whatever's available, even if it has legs. Make friends with neighbors, goats, and the occasional camel. Laugh at the absurdity of it all. You're tougher than you were yesterday. You're a little hungrier, a little dustier, but a lot wiser. You've survived another day in biblical times. You've mastered the art of improvisation, humility, and hope. You're ready for whatever comes next. Because out here, every sunrise is both a challenge and a victory. Take a deep breath, enjoy the morning light, and never turn down an extra piece of bread. You've earned it.